The decision to move to Pakistan was, frankly, a mistake. This unexpected phrase was uttered by the French couple, Amir and Aisha. After 10 years of living in the US, they had decided to make a move. Throughout their time in North America, they had grown tired and worn out, struggling to adapt to the local culture and customs. With hope and anxiety, they set foot on Pakistani soil, hoping it would be a new beginning, a completely different living space. However, after just a short time, they uttered that very same shocking phrase. What had made them feel like they had failed in the US after 10 long years? And what discoveries awaited them next? What was the cultural difference between the US and Pakistan? And what shocking experiences did they have? Let's journey together to the end of this story to learn about the chain of amazing events they experienced. I am Aisha, a French woman. I lived in the US with my husband Amir, who is 5 years my senior, and our daughter Sana. Although Sana is now almost 30 and an adult, independent woman, our entire family is French. Due to my husband's work, we lived in the US for a full 10 years. On the occasion of Amir's retirement, we decided to leave the US, a place that had become familiar, because we were tired of life in America. My husband and I both felt this to our core. Living for 10 years, of course, you get used to the environment, but it wasn't the kind of habit born from affection, but rather from resignation. If we were asked whether we liked living in the US, the answer would be a resounding no. Moving to the US was not our family's desire, but a sudden decision due to my husband's job at the time. We were in shock. Sana had just been accepted into her dream university in Paris, and suddenly she had to move to America. Remembering those difficulties, we hastily looked for a university for our daughter to transfer to and moved immediately. Sana must have been very sad to give up her studies at a prestigious university, for which she had worked so hard, but busy with accelerated English studies, she seemed to quickly forget that regret. We had not the slightest intention of staying in the US. On the contrary, in our hearts, we always cherished the thought of returning to France as soon as possible. For my husband and me, the US was a place we could never grow attached to. One of the main reasons was the problem of hygiene. From the very first day in the US, I felt a strong aversion to this. Why is there so much trash here? I couldn't believe my eyes. The streets of American cities were littered with trash, and this seemed to be taken for granted. Even in the city center, empty boxes and plastic bottles were carelessly thrown wherever. I often muttered to myself, "It's simply unbelievable." Even if there were trash cans around, they were also overflowing with garbage, forming entire mountains. Such scenes were common in everyday life. Why was this allowed? The irritation in me grew. In France, you almost never see trash on the streets. If someone throws trash next to a bin, those around will immediately reprimand them. This is completely normal. The consciousness that trash must be disposed of in the proper place is deeply ingrained in us. However, in the US, I didn't feel this consciousness. It seemed no one cared about the trash under their feet. Maybe it's a difference in national character? I once again felt the cultural differences keenly. For us French people, it was incredibly difficult to adapt to an environment with such a low level of hygiene. Furthermore, I was particularly annoyed by the dirtiness of public restrooms. It was simply unbearable. How many times I thought about it. The toilets in shopping malls in urban areas seemed relatively clean, but as soon as you drove a little out of the center, you often encountered toilets that looked like hell. Toilet paper scattered on the floor, trash, and plastic bags were commonplace. A floor wet from water or puddles of urine, left just like that, was a truly unbelievable sight. Do people actually use this? This scene made me doubt my own eyes. When our daughter Sana was little, she once wanted to use a public toilet in a rural area, and the horrifying filth stunned her so much that she never wanted to enter such toilets again. From that day on, I was determined never to go near a dirty toilet in the US. But every time we went on a long trip, I had to search for clean toilets in advance, which was very inconvenient. I don't know how many times I sighed. Oh, if only all toilets were as clean as in France. Next, regarding the manners of Americans, I also had many complaints. Behavior that would be unthinkable in France was considered normal in the US. I was particularly struck by the noise in public places. Young people gathering in front of the train station and shouting loudly, middle-aged women chatting noisily in a shopping mall without any regard for others. How can one remain calm in such a noisy place? I always thought this to myself. In France, maintaining silence in public places is a widely accepted norm. Almost no one makes noise. Therefore, every time I witnessed the noise in the US, I couldn't hide my surprise. I especially hoped that my daughter, Sana, no matter what environment she was in, could become a well-mannered woman. I didn't want her to get used to this noisy environment. I spoke to Sana many times, hoping she wouldn't follow the crowd and would grow up to be an elegant woman. But since her friends around her were very noisy, I worried about how to raise her. Teaching good manners without spending money is incredibly difficult. Sometimes I even despaired. I guess there's nothing to be done in this country. But Sana seemed to understand our thoughts and has now grown into a well-mannered woman. Now I can breathe a sigh of relief. I am so glad that Sana grew up to be so wonderful. In addition, in the US, I clearly felt the willingness of people to push others aside for their own benefit. Why are they so selfish? I often had this feeling. Of course, it's human nature in any country to want to gain benefits for oneself. But in the US, this desire was extremely strong. They seemed to have no hesitation in pushing others aside. I often wondered how they could do such things, especially when boarding a bus or queuing for a store opening. I often saw such behavior. In France, this would be completely impossible. I was amazed by this difference. In France, pushing to get ahead is considered bad manners and is met with contempt. I prayed countless times to myself for people to be more aware of their surroundings when doing things, but in the end, it never came to pass. In US cities, there are tall buildings that young people love, and film culture also spreads abroad, so the country gives a very vibrant impression on the surface. In fact, the number of foreign tourists is also increasing. I, too, once thought that the US had changed a lot. However, behind the facade of these glittering streets were scenes as if from another world. Just by turning into a small alley, a gray, featureless concrete block would suddenly appear, with scattered trash and many people living on the street. I couldn't believe such places existed. I doubted my own eyes. Of course, France is not entirely without such places, but in the US, the contrast was too stark, which made a strong impression on me. Why does no one try to solve this? It was unclear to me, but it seemed the state was taking no action. Despite so many problems like this, the entire country seemed to turn a blind eye. I couldn't help but feel a sense of irony that this was a country with only an outward gloss. Finally, the maintenance of infrastructure such as roads and parks in the US was very poor. This also gave me a culture shock. How can they be so careless? I was often amazed. For example, the road near our house was a very steep slope, and not just a slope, but also tilted to the left and right, making it extremely difficult to walk on. As a joke, you could say we were participating in an obstacle course every day, but in reality, walking on this road every day, I felt an inconvenience that was no joke at all. My body swayed up and down, left and right, and I had to use all my strength to maintain balance. With such a steep incline and tilt, I got angry every day. Who on earth designed this road? I also told my husband that walking on such roads would be very difficult in old age. We are not young anymore either, and walking on such roads daily put a great strain on our bodies. Especially my husband, due to constantly walking on the road with a left-right tilt, eventually developed back and leg pain. We began to feel that continuing to live here was becoming difficult. This also became a major reason for our decision to leave the US. I don't know how many times I sighed. The height differences are one thing, but at least the left-right tilt could have been fixed. I keenly felt the need for better infrastructure that considers the health and safety of residents. Thus, life in the US was full of difficulties and disappointments. The hygiene problems, the differences in public manners, the flawed infrastructure, all were reasons why our family could not love America. When my husband retired, he and I finally made a decision: no more enduring. We decided to leave the US and return to France. However, just as we began preparing to return to France, our daughter Sana made a stunning confession: "I'm marrying a Pakistani man." I couldn't hide my astonishment. "What did you say?" I couldn't help but cry out. I had never heard that Sana had such a fiancé. I was sure that Sana would return to France with us and marry a Frenchman in the future. This unexpected confession left my husband and me speechless. Then Sana continued, "I think I will live in Pakistan in the future. Mom, Dad, why don't you move to Pakistan and live with me?" Her words confused us. Live in Pakistan? My husband and I looked at each other. I was so tired of living in the US, and in my heart, I only wanted one thing: to escape America and return to France. Pakistan, of course, is not America, but it is also a huge foreign country. I really didn't expect that two such different worlds could be so culturally different. Although the thought of starting life abroad again seemed absurd to me, I couldn't imagine living in another country, far from our only and beloved daughter. After much hesitation, the desire to be close to Sana won. We decided to move to Pakistan with Sana. We already felt that American culture was not for us, so we went with anxiety, thinking that a change of place would change little, and could only pray and hope that things would be at least a little better than in the US. With these thoughts, we set off. However, shortly after arriving in Pakistan, we experienced a whole series of surprises that surpassed all our expectations. The first thing we felt was how clean it was here, incomparable to the US. "How different this is from America," my husband exclaimed in amazement. But in many countries, it's only clean around the airport, so I was slow to draw conclusions. However, on the airport shuttle going to the city center, I immediately felt the difference from the US. There wasn't a speck of dust in the vehicle. Where are the trash cans? Out of curiosity, I started looking for them. In the end, a small and discreet bin was installed near the exit, but it was almost empty. So small, and almost empty inside, I was even more surprised. There was absolutely no trash on the floor or seats either. Where did all the trash go? I couldn't understand. Only after observing those around me did I realize what was happening. Almost no one in the vehicle was producing trash. What is everyone doing? I was amazed. Everyone sat very quietly, looking out the window, listening to music on headphones, or looking at their phones. There was not a single person snacking or eating takeout food, which was a common sight in the US. Only once did I see a mother give a crying child a piece of candy. But she immediately put the wrapper in her jacket pocket. "Do Pakistanis take their trash home with them?" I asked Sana. Sana replied, "Yes, that's right. Since there aren't many trash cans on the streets either, it seems everyone takes their trash with them to dispose of." Taking it with them, is that normal? I was amazed. I also like cleanliness, but it had never occurred to me to take my trash home with me. But it's true. If there's a bin, it will eventually get dirty. Ah, so that's it. If everyone, like the Pakistanis, took their trash with them, then bins wouldn't be needed, and the vehicles and streets would be clean. I thought and admired it. After getting off the bus, we took a short walk around the city. As Sana had said, there were almost no trash cans. Despite this, there was no scattered trash. Truly very clean. I was deeply impressed by the high level of consciousness of Pakistanis regarding hygiene. At that moment, I began to understand that I had come to a place with a completely different culture than the US. However, since I had just arrived in Pakistan, I still couldn't fully trust everything at once. It will gradually get better, I told myself, while starting to carefully observe the manners of the people, which I had so hated in the US. But from the first bus ride, the difference was too obvious. Not only did no one shout in the vehicle, but even ordinary conversations were almost unheard. "Unbelievable," I muttered. Sometimes someone would talk, but in a very low voice. Silence was always maintained in the vehicle. Seeing this, my husband couldn't help but quietly ask Sana, "Is there a rule in Pakistan not to talk in vehicles?" Sana said there was no rule, but it seemed to be an unwritten law among Pakistanis. because of a national character that highly values the principle of not disturbing others, everyone is mostly silent in the vehicle. I thought how wonderful that was. The Pakistani national character, which I heard about from Sana, was the complete opposite of the American one I had imagined. In the US, many put their own interests above the thought of not disturbing others, but in Pakistan, respecting those around you has become a habit. I felt this deeply again. The place where I felt this national character was not only in the bus. On the next bus we transferred to, I saw the same scene. When boarding, without anyone's instructions, everyone naturally formed a line, no one pushed, and they got on one by one. When getting off, they naturally maintained order as well, and I even saw some people nodding to the driver as a sign of thanks. I had never seen such a scene not only in the US, but even in France. What a beautiful place this is. I couldn't help but be moved. We witnessed such wonderful scenes countless times in one day. At that moment, I was forced to admit that the US and Pakistan are two completely different worlds. How can they be so different, being on different continents? I asked myself this question countless times. My husband seemed to have the same feelings. Honestly, it's hard to believe this is happening in the modern world. However, the beauty of Pakistan was not only in interpersonal manners, but also in the preparedness of public infrastructure. Living in the US, I had despaired over the terrible roads and imperfect infrastructure, but in Pakistan, I saw none of these problems. It was as if I had entered another world. The unprepared gravel roads or bumpy roads that I saw in the US and France were completely absent in urban Pakistan. To be precise, as far as I could see, there wasn't a single one. All roads were covered with smooth asphalt. With every step, I couldn't help but admire how easy it is to walk here. Moreover, there are very few steep slopes in Pakistan. If there are, they are gentle, comfortable slopes for walking, not creating a feeling of tension. It is admirable that they built everything so thoughtfully. I was amazed. Even on steep stairs, there were handrails, allowing people with weak legs like us to move around peacefully. My husband also looked relieved, saying, "With this, I don't have to worry so much about my back and leg pain." There were no sloping roads with left-right height differences either. How did they manage to prepare everything so meticulously? I was endlessly touched. Pakistan perfectly solved the problems I suffered from in the US. Only by truly coming to Pakistan did I deeply realize how much my days in the US were filled with patience and resignation. In the US, I always told myself that the French and Americans are different, and despite my dissatisfaction, I tried to compromise in order to live. I thought that's how I got used to America, but looking back now, I realize it wasn't habit, but just an attempt to resign myself. However, in Pakistan, I didn't need to do that. It's incredible that one can spend every day in such a comfortable environment. I was truly moved. Pakistan gave me a national character that doesn't require patience and allows one to live positively. This is true happiness. I think so from the bottom of my heart. And what made life in Pakistan even more beautiful was the caring service of Pakistani employees. My husband and I wanted to get to know Pakistan better, so we decided that after moving, we would travel around the country. Setting off, we checked into our first hotel. The service of the Pakistani staff who greeted us was so surprisingly attentive that I was touched. When we brought our luggage into the lobby to check in, an employee immediately ran up to us and said, "You must be tired. Please, let us take care of your luggage." After I thanked him, he smiled and smoothly completed all the necessary procedures before we could say anything. Such delicate care deeply impressed me. When I muttered that I was a little thirsty, he immediately asked, "Would you like me to bring you some water?" Such service touched me to the core. This spirit of hospitality is simply magnificent. In the US, even in luxury hotels, you rarely encounter such attentive service. But in Pakistan, wherever we stayed, the staff treated me with incredible care. It's amazing that they have such a deeply ingrained culture of respect for the customer. I fell more and more in love with this country, Pakistan. After that, Our days in Pakistan also became a series of surprises and excitements. Although it is another country, not France, where we were born and raised, my husband and I cherish great dreams and hopes for life in Pakistan. We are confident that we can live every day in this wonderful country, Pakistan, just beautifully. Expectations for the life ahead are getting bigger and bigger. It's just that we were going to return to our homeland, France, but now we can't. From that perspective, coming to Pakistan was, of course, a mistake. Nevertheless, we are sincerely glad that Sana chose this place. Living in a place different from where you were born and raised, it is natural to feel differences in culture and environment. At first, confusion arises, like it seems a little different here. Gradually, this confusion accumulates, and this is probably the experience of everyone who lives abroad. However, if you have to endure to live with local manners and customs that you cannot accept, then the stress from this is unpredictable. It is not just stress, it greatly affects the psyche and can even harm your health. As in the case of the French couple, if cultural differences cause health problems, one must even consider the possibility of moving again. When you feel you cannot continue to live in an environment that is bad for your health, that place is no longer for you. This makes one deeply realize that countries or local authorities wishing to attract immigrants must anticipate such risks in advance and carry out the necessary infrastructure work. For example, manhole covers. The manhole covers in Pakistan have almost no height difference with the road surface, and the impact when walking or driving over them is minimal. However, in the US, it is said that there are manhole covers that are lower than the road level, or, conversely, protrude above it. This is astonishing. A manhole is installed to connect the underground and the surface, so some depression is understandable, but why it should protrude upwards is completely incomprehensible. Therefore, the thought, couldn't they have done it better, is fully justified. Furthermore, in the US, it is said that one sometimes encounters dangerous potholes that make you wonder, why is there a hole here? This is also related to the poorly prepared roads mentioned in the story earlier. No one knows if the hole was dug intentionally during road work or formed accidentally, and it is said that these dangerous potholes are left unattended. In Pakistan, you don't have to walk worrying about whether there is a hole in the road, but in the US, if you walk carelessly, you could really face danger. Speaking of such unprepared roads, some might think this applies to rural areas, but in fact, even in cities, there are places with imperfect preparation. In the words of Ayesha from the story, it is a lack of concern for people to be able to use it without harm to their health. For example, the difference in steps. In the US, it is not uncommon to find stairs where the height and width of each step are not uniform. A normal staircase has steps of almost the same height and similar dimensions, so you can go up and down it calmly. However, in the US, due to uneven stairs, it is impossible to walk in rhythm. Many accidents of tripping have occurred due to a small difference in steps. Why so disorderly, uneven? How can one safely go up and down? Feeling bewildered is natural. In the US, the preparation of public infrastructure is very poor. This can be called a major infrastructure problem. Why it is so careless is something you will feel many times while living in the US. Moreover, the urban areas of the US, although glittering and full of life, on the other hand, have many poor areas. No matter how prosperous a city is, when you think about the people living in poverty behind its facade, your heart becomes heavy. The US, in recent years, has become a popular country among young people, thanks to movies, fashion, and so on. This is because American culture attracts worldwide attention. Shopping malls and charming commercial facilities attract many people. However, on the other hand, it is also true that for people living in the US, there are many difficulties. One must consider not only the external glitter, but also the people living in that city. I feel this keenly. It is important not only that culture and fashion attract the world's attention, but also that residents are provided with a safer and more comfortable environment. No matter how wonderful a shopping center is, if the safety under your feet is not guaranteed, it is meaningless. The fact that the us attracts the world's attention is wonderful, but it is important to understand the difficulties that ordinary people face behind this facade. One should not focus only on the glittering part, but also pay attention to what is underfoot, that is, the basis of life. I think so. This applies not only to the US but to any other country. I think that many countries should not only care about the external glitter, but also look at the other side and act. Of course, not everything in Pakistan is perfect either, but the fact that there are people who have so highly praised the infrastructure and public services of Pakistan, like the French couple from this story, is a source of pride for us Pakistanis. However, we cannot rest on our laurels. We Pakistanis must also raise our individual consciousness and strive to create a more livable society. I felt this again. It is important not only to prepare the infrastructure well, but also for everyone to be able to use it, to pass on the foundation that Pakistan has built to the next generation and develop it further. Is that not the responsibility of us living today?